Well, Mike Tomlin talked about being happy to be here, being happy to be in this Hall of Fame game. Probably the only time you're ever going to hear Mike Tomlin say he's happy to be somewhere, but he's happy to be there because the Pittsburgh Steelers not only appeared in the Hall of Fame game, not only were able to celebrate some Steelers greats as a whole slew of Steelers from 2020's class and 2021's get inducted this weekend into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. They do it after a victory. So the Pittsburgh Steelers kick off their new season, their new preseason, with a 16-3 victory over the Dallas Cowboys. I'm Mike Asti, and I am joined by Nick Farabaugh, our contributor here at Steelers Now, our draft analyst and overall analyst here at the network, to kind of go over this game and recap here on our first edition of this new year, Steelers edition of Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live. So, Nick, thanks for joining me, man. We got Tomlin, we got Mason, got to talk to them both. Didn't really get anybody else, but they both kind of talked about how they were satisfied with the victory. Tomlin really talked about how he was happy with composure and poise after training camp. You never know what you're going to get in a game action. He mentioned that from, of course, Dwayne Haskins. Rudolph talked about loving that from Najee Harris, finally seeing him in game action. So we got to see some of these young Steelers in game action. They did win the game. What are your overall takeaways from this preseason game? The game doesn't really count, but this preseason has been more scrutinized, and this offseason has been more scrutinized than most for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a pretty important offseason, not just for 2021, but also 2022 and beyond, right? I mean, there's a lot of young players that you're watching this year,
right?
Especially on the offensive line. I think that's where the first takeaway is. I think the offensive line looked a lot better than I thought they would.
Okay, wow.
I thought specifically, maybe not, the depth guys. I thought, though, that you looked at Dan Moore and Kendrick Green. I thought they both put in solid performances. I thought that Green in particular was pretty nasty. Had one rep where he drilled a guy into the ground through the whistle. I thought he was pretty solid. I thought Dan Moore held up really well, which was surprising to me because I think Dan Moore's had a lot of trouble at camp. So I liked what I saw from him. Even guys down the depth chart, Aviante Collins had a nice game, I thought, at tackle. He could be a guy that can maybe push for a late roster spot. I thought Kevin Rader he had a great block on the Kalen Ballage touchdown run. I thought the run blocking wasn't that bad. And obviously we don't have
You're being more optimistic than even Tomlin went to, by the way. Tomlin and Mason, they talked about liking it, but they kept mentioning still work in progress. They weren't willing to judge them too much right now, but you're willing to take that leap so far.
Yeah, I'm willing to take a leap that they were better than I thought they would be. I'll say that. In the first game action, I was impressed by what I saw from both of those guys. Now, obviously, you don't have Zach Banner, you don't have Trey Turner, you don't have Kevin Dotson.
Right.
So what's it going to look like as a full unit? And you don't have Chuks Okorafor, but I liked what I saw from Kendrick Green, and that's the biggest thing I think on the O-line.
I think that's to say the very least, and I think that having positives to take away from the offensive line performance after an actual game, that's a plus. I don't know if anybody expected that. So, of course, as you mentioned, many of the figured starters and contributors, Zach Banner in particular, who we only got to see a quarter and a half of him last year after he won the starting job in camp last year. A lot of unknown around this offensive line, more than really any other part of this team. But to have those positive takeaways, that's a big deal here, of course. Mike Asti, Nick Farabaugh here of Steelers Now and our Steelers edition of Pittsburgh Postgame on PSL. We see some people here in the live chat. Feel free to chat along with us. I don't know if I'm going to get to you, though, because as you see, I'm doing this show from an undisclosed location here in the press box in Canton, Ohio, as I travel down to cover this Hall of Fame game. So I don't know when I'm going to get the hook. But nonetheless, hit that subscribe button. We'll hit you in the comments. We'll hit you on Twitter if we don't have a chance to do this here, because we're probably going to just steamroll through and talk to Nick. But aside from the offensive line, you know what everyone else is going to focus on, the quarterback competition. Even if Tomlin still doesn't want to admit this is going on, and Haskins said, if it's not, I'm going to make it a competition. We actually got to have that answered from Mason Rudolph. We had a question asked directly to him. What's your response to Haskins saying that? And he said he'd expect nothing else. He's treating it like a competition as well. So that was interesting to me, that the incumbent backup is saying he knows this is a competition. And he even made a comment, Nick, in which he said, I know there's always opportunities if you're good enough to have a seat at an NFL table, if that's here or elsewhere. That's the first time I heard Mason Rudolph ever say if he has to have the opportunity elsewhere, he'd be okay with that. That almost leads me to believe that he, in the back of his mind, is saying, maybe this isn't locked up for me here. And remember, he's the only contractual quarterback left after next season. What did you see from these two guys, though? Anything change your mind? Neither one of them were bad necessarily, but did anything change your mind between Rudolph starting and then Haskins coming in?
Not really. I thought that Rudolph was very mediocre, to say the least. I thought he made a nice throw to Claypool. I thought that was a nice throw, but
yeah,
the fumble was definitely a bad play, and then the throw to Washington.
Yeah, his boy. Yeah.
Yeah, it was probably the worst throw of the night for the Steelers. I mean, that was the worst throw that we saw in this game from the Steelers side of things. We saw a lot worse quarterback play from the Cowboys. I'll say that. I guess that's something. I mean, I think the Cowboys backup quarterbacks were significantly worse than the Pittsburgh Steelers backup quarterbacks.
Okay. Maybe they should call Mason Rudolph.
Yeah, maybe they should. But like Haskins didn't do anything crazy today. Didn't really stretch the ball out a lot. He didn't go downfield. He had 4 air yards per attempt. So that's just a lot of checkdowns. And he said, Tomlin calls him check down, like legitimately. That is his nickname with Mike Tomlin. Check down. Okay.
Is that a compliment? Is that an insult? Maybe that
should be an insult because you don't want to be called check down.
Right.
And he was checking it down all day today. Now, yeah, he was a game manager. He led them to points today. No turnovers, but he had some drops from his receivers. But the one time he did take a deep ball, it was a bad throw, aired it too far to the pylon. He was a beat late on that Gentry throw. Gentry could have caught it, but he should have hit him out of his break. And the one Washington dropped, he threw that a bullet. I mean, it was a 1-yard drag route. Like, put some air under it, man. Like, the reason Washington dropped that football is because he threw a freaking rocket 2 yards away from him. Like, you don't do that, Like, it wasn't a tight window or anything. He didn't have to throw a rocket. So, there's things with Haskins. I think his mechanics still look awful, his lower body mechanics specifically.
Okay.
I think they're awful, truly. The worst part of his game. He hasn't changed that since he was at Ohio State, which is worrying to me because we're in year 3 now with it. Usually if that is fixed, it's by now.
Unless you want to be glass half full and say the first 2 years in Washington were a wash because he had so much trouble on the field, off the field, him and coaches didn't get along. Maybe you can give him a mulligan for those years. Not that the NFL is going to do that.
Yeah, well, exactly. And the thing is, stability is everything in the NFL. Josh Allen could just as easily be a Dwayne Haskins right now if he's not in Buffalo, right? Like,
right.
And the thing is, you look historically, look at guys from year 2 on. It's very rare to make the year 3, year 4 leap even. Usually it's a year 2 leap. And sometimes that instability kills you. I mean, it kills careers. So we'll see how Haskins can respond. Now, he has a new system. He has a new coach. He has new everything. So I think it's interesting to see what Haskins can do. But, I mean, I thought Haskins was very also mediocre today. He clearly has a stronger arm than Mason Rudolph, but I don't think he differentiated himself. If he looks like this the next 4 preseason games, I think the job ends up going to Rudolph, personally.
Okay. Well, see, this is interesting, Nick, because I really can't think of another analyst out there, and I've tried to be fair as well, that's been willing to actually provide some criticism to Dwayne Haskins. He's been receiving tons of praise, and he's looked good in camp. But as we all know, until you do it in game action, and this is the first time Mike Tomlin, the Steelers, have seen him in a game as a Pittsburgh Steeler. Of course, he's had that NFL tape with Washington that's not honestly been that impressive. And yeah, Tomlin talked about this. Mason Rudolph even talked about this, that Haskins looked like he has some poise out there. But of course, mediocre Mason, maybe mediocre Haskins to this point. And the checkdowns at least aren't going to be turnovers and mistakes necessarily, but they're also not going to lead to big plays. There's nothing that explosive that I saw from his game, at least through week 1 of the preseason. So that is something to note that I would say for me, I went into the preseason thinking that Rudolph had the edge, even though Haskins had the talent edge, just because the Steelers were familiar with Rudolph. He did get better last year, and Kevin Colbert made it clear that if they have to go into next year with Mason Rudolph, they're not going to go cry a river forever. They felt that he could be comfortable for them to win 8 or 9 games, which could squeak into the postseason. That's kind of what they were saying. And then it felt like Haskins was kind of beating him out in camp. But I almost feel like, for me, now that we reset in game 1 of the preseason, it will be interesting to see what happens in week 2. But I would say Mason might have a slight edge again to be the number 2. I don't know if Haskins has to prove more. Maybe Tomlin's being harder on him, but I think he has to prove more, even though having the talent edge.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, the thing is, Rudolph was facing starters and higher level guys than Haskins was. And they arguably looked essentially the same. I mean, obviously, again, Haskins has a stronger arm, but it doesn't mean he has superior arm talent. He was a one-speed thrower all day today. He only threw bullets. You can't survive in the NFL by just throwing bullets everywhere. You have to put some touch on the ball. And the one time he did put touch on the ball, he sailed it over the guy's head out of bounds, deep.
Right.
So, it's a very small sample size, though, so I'm not going to, chastise Haskins. I'm not going to chastise Rudolph. I think both of these guys are very mediocre quarterbacks at best, so I think it's very futile regardless. Okay. Neither of these guys this is the biggest takeaway.
You're not willing to induct Haskins into the Hall of Fame like some fans at this point? They want to put him here in the shrine to the left of where I'm sitting here. Yeah.
I'll say this, the biggest takeaway. The biggest takeaway right now, and this has been my belief for a long time until someone changes it, I think that the future franchise quarterback is not on this roster. And I think that should be rather apparent to most people at this point. I mean, Rudolph hasn't done anything to show it. Haskins has promise, but again, you look at the Washington tape and it's ugly, right? Like he wasn't just it. Yeah, the off the field stuff probably caused the release, but he wasn't good on the field either. Like, let's be real with that. He was bad in Washington.
Yeah. If you're lighting the lamp on the field, they're going to let you linger, especially as a first-round draft pick.
Exactly.
No matter what else is going on. It's not like the off-the-field stuff was so egregious that they couldn't have kept him on the roster. It wasn't great, but the police weren't necessarily going to lock him up for 10 years. It wasn't that bad. So for them to cut the cord, that showed the coaches weren't thrilled with him. And also, it's important for him to be on the up and up off the field as well as on the field here with the Steelers, maybe even more than Rudolph, because the Steelers are well aware of his past. And again, this is a low-risk, high-reward situation, though, so I don't disagree with you, but it's low-risk, high-reward. I think it was a great move bringing him in. There's no negative here. It pushes Rudolph potentially. If Haskins works out because he has a first-round grade, great for you. Switching gears, though, again, Nick Farabaugh joining me here on our Steelers edition of Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live. We do have a lot of comments here, but I can recap them really easily. It is Rudolph sucks. Rudolph is trash. Haskins is the guy. Nick, you made the right points on Haskins. So again, as the same on Twitter, and it seems with Steeler fans, I don't fully get it, to be honest with you, Nick. Maybe we can talk off the air on what's going on.
Yeah,
I think there's such a disdain for Mason that's why Steeler fans are so willing to anoint Haskins as the guy. But
yeah, I mean, listen,
they are on the Haskins train.
I'm not going to argue with you that Rudolph sucks. I don't think he's a good quarterback. I think he's pretty bad, actually. Like, I think he's probably a QB3 in this league.
Okay.
Now, I'll say this, year 3 with Haskins, yeah, he showed a little bit of QB2 traits, but if you want to be a quality backup in this league, or
be the starter in a year.
Yeah,
I mean, that's that possibility. You're right.
I mean, listen, if they sign Haskins and he's the future backup of the future, it's a success. It doesn't matter. That's a success. Because you signed him for $800K on a futures deal.
Sure. Right.
So, I mean, that's a successful signing regardless. And I think he did show traits to prove that he could be that guy.
Sure.
Taking care of the football, I would like to see him air it out more and create some more explosive plays. But I do think there's certain promise to Haskins that says this guy could be a backup for the Pittsburgh Steelers in the future. But again, I wasn't impressed by either of them today. I'm definitely more impressed by what I've seen from Haskins in camp, for sure.
Right.
But I thought Josh Dobbs was the best quarterback today.
I mean, I don't know if it's worth a segment, but absolutely. Yeah. And Tomlin was asked about that. I mean, Josh Dobbs has been able to stabilize himself. He's certainly a quarterback in this league, and you got to give it to him. And Tomlin mentioned this years ago. Dobbs was written off. He had that competition with Mason in camp. Mason beat him out. Dobbs left. Dobbs is now back. So Dobbs is semi that cockroach that just can't leave the Steelers. And I don't mean that in a negative way. He certainly has proven he can be, at minimum, a QB3, maybe a backup on certain teams. I mean, he's maybe he would be best served to help us in the world since he can be a rocket scientist. Maybe even if I think he's a future coach in this league, probably a future quarterbacks coach in this league. He's a really, really smart guy. I actually wish we get to talk to him more. I was hoping maybe even to speak to him today, but not the case. But yeah, he had a solid day, threw a touchdown pass, played better than both of them. But of course, the backup job is between Rudolph and Haskins. Dobbs would then fall in line. But Dobbs certainly has played well enough that he's probably QB3. And whoever, if Mason doesn't beat out Haskins, Mason probably maybe is traded or something else happens. And we'll see if it goes in the reverse. Nick Farabaugh again, Mike Asti here. Nick, I do want to get to the other side of the football here before I would get the hook. The Steelers generated turnovers in this game. That's how they really were able to win this game. The defense only held the Cowboys to 3 points. TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, Joe Hayden, Minka Fitzpatrick, the normal players that are going to contribute and generate production for you defensively, your defensive leaders, didn't play in this game. But what did you see from the defense here? Because the defense had been losing some 7-on-7 drills. Cam Hayward kind of had been critical of the defense, even when getting Alex Highsmith comparisons. He kind of said, I'm not ready for that yet. He got to make his own name. He's not there. So did anyone on the defense kind of maybe prove that, hey, we can get this done? We can fill in if needed. We're going to be okay as a defensive unit since it's been a great unit, but still some question marks this offseason.
Yeah, outside of that O-line, I think that the defense was the biggest positive today. First of all, I thought the D-line was spectacular. From Alex Highsmith to Quincy Roche getting a sack, Cassius Marsh had a strip sack. I think Jameer Jones had a nice game. I thought that the D linemen had a really good game, from Buggs to Davis to Loudermilk to Abdullah Anderson. I mean, up and down the depth chart, I thought that D line was phenomenal, and we expected that. But they're deep too. They're really deep on that side. I thought that James Pierre played really well today. I really did. He got targeted a decent bit, and I thought he rose to the challenge. I thought that we saw really good stuff from James Pierre. Now, outside of that, I do think the corners were a little shaky at times. I think Justin Lane had the strip, obviously, but he could not beat anyone. He really could not cover anyone. Mark Gilbert had a few nice plays. So did Steven Denmark, but none of them stood out in like wow ways. Millette had a bad game. I think Arthur Millette really struggled. I thought Antoine Brooks really took the step up on him today. I thought Brooks had a solid day. And I think he's definitely the front runner for that slot corner spot.
Yeah, I mean, he generated one of the turnovers or got the fumble recovery, so certainly he was on the stat sheet. I mean, he definitely was somebody that stood out to us in the press box in this game for sure.
Yeah, so I think that he's a guy that definitely won today. I thought the linebackers, the starting linebackers today, I thought Spillane and UG3 both were pretty rough today.
Okay.
I thought Spillane got really chewed on in man coverage. I mean, he got destroyed by tight ends and running backs. And then UG3 had that really bad missed tackle for the first down. He struggled too. I think Johnson and Allen outplayed both of them.
I was going to ask about Buddy Johnson, yeah.
I thought Buddy Johnson played really well today, and I thought Marcus Allen had a decent game too. So I would be interested in seeing – I think Spillane's job is completely safe. And, again, he was the main coverage guy today.
I was going to say, is that a concern for you in terms of biggest concerns? Because obviously he had to play a lot with Devin Bush's injury last year. Devin Bush healthy back this year, sitting out, but figuring he's going to be the guy this year. But they're certainly going to rely on Spillane.
Yeah, so Spillane was the MAC today, which means he's the main coverage guy. That's going to be Devin Bush. Spillane will be more in his downhill role come season, which is what I think he's best at, which was interesting to me. I wonder why they put him there today. Okay. I thought that was a pretty boneheaded move on their part. I think UG3 should be getting those snaps, but
okay.
It is what it is. I think Spillane in coverage is definitely a concern if teams can somehow isolate him there. But they need to make sure that they can protect Spillane in man coverage. Just don't get him in man coverage, period. Like, do not put him there. He's bad. We saw it last year against Jarvis Landry. He's bad in man coverage. Just do not put him there. He can do zone coverage. He's decent in that. But do not put him there. But I'm very excited to see Buddy Johnson. I'd like to see him get reps that UG3 got today. Maybe next game or the third preseason game. See if he can snap that third spot. I think he's been great in camp too. So I'm really excited to see what Buddy Johnson brings to the table.
Nick Farabaugh, Mike Asti here, Steelers Now, Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Smash that subscribe button. I have seen a lot of you here watching live and in the chat. And of course, feel free to comment after you watch this video archive. I will comment back here on the channel, and also find both of us on Twitter. But Nick, before we close things up, I think the defense looked obviously good on the stat sheet. They certainly generated the turnovers, which the Steelers do. That's been the Steelers' bread and butter defensively over the years. You do have to take it with a grain of salt, though, because it was against the Cowboys' mediocre offense. It was against the Cowboys' mediocre backup quarterbacks. If you're going to say the backup quarterbacks of the Cowboys sucked, then does that really allow you to promote too much in what the Steelers' defense did? So we will certainly see moving forward. I do want to get your overall thoughts about the next preseason game, though. Week 2 of the preseason, Steelers' second preseason game. But week 1 of the preseason, Steelers' second preseason game. It'll be in Philadelphia against the Eagles, another Thursday night game. Mason said he has to watch the film. There's a lot that he knows he has to improve on for that game. What are you looking for the Steelers' second preseason game in terms of what are you watching for? Who do you think is going to play? Will that be different than this game? Do you expect Mason to still start? And what are you looking for from Mason, Haskins, and then obviously the team as a whole?
Yeah, so first of all, you would hope that you can get a more involved Anthony McFarland. I think he was limited today because of that quad that he's been bothered by. You would like to see more Benny Snell as well, because that running back room right now, you really don't know how that's going to shake out behind Najee. I mean,
there's some in the chatters here that liked Ballage.
Yeah, Balash played well today,
I
thought.
Yeah,
and then he got hurt as well, right. I believe. So
he's apparently fine though, according to
Tom. So hopefully Balash and McFarland and whatever's wrong with Snell, hopefully that clears up. I'd like to see the whole running back room and not have to watch Jalen Samuels again. But we'll see. I would like to see that cleared up. I would like to see more of the starting O-line there. I don't think we're going to get Zach Banner next week. I think they're bringing him along very slowly. I don't know if we'll see Zach Banner at all in the preseason. Maybe on the fourth game. I think maybe on the fourth game when Ben takes, his one series, maybe they'll throw Banner in there.
Yeah.
I don't know if we'll see him though. But I would like to see, Turner. I would like to hope maybe a core 4 and Dotson if they can get ready. I'd like to see that. That would be big. Because then I think we could start to get a feel for what this O-line is, because especially with guys like Javon Hargrave and Ryan Kerrigan and Fletcher Cox. If they do suit up for Philadelphia, we could get a nice little litmus test for those guys. Now, I would personally like to see Haskins start that game. I would like to see what Haskins can do against, the competition Mason faced today. So I feel like if you give him maybe the first start, then you can see more of what you got in these guys. Does Haskins fall off the table and essentially just go completely explode? Does he play worse than Rudolph did? Does he actually take deep shots and impress? I don't know.
Yeah, it could be decided when you think about it. And honestly, Tomlin obviously has not named his starter, and Mason kind of talked like he thinks he's going to start the next preseason game, as you expect him to say. But it does bring up an interesting thought that you almost got to give Haskins one of these next 2 starts. The Steelers are fortunate, actually, to be playing in this Hall of Fame game this year, needing to evaluate these quarterbacks, having these 5 games. It's actually good for them this year, even though normally you wouldn't win all these games. So if he doesn't start week 2 for the Steelers, I imagine their 3rd preseason game, he's definitely starting because, as you said, you have to just simply see Haskins against the number 1 defensive unit or the best the opponent's going to put out there. And if he totally sucks, then maybe Tomlin will say, okay, maybe Mason's not going to be in Canton someday, but maybe he is the best backup for us. Maybe there's a ceiling with Haskins as well. Maybe Haskins is not ready. And if we're in win now mode, maybe Mason is our backup.
Hey, I mean, I wouldn't be against them giving Dobbs a start after tonight. I wouldn't be against it going Mason today, Haskins next week, then Dobbs, and then Ben obviously getting.
We'll see. I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen.
I don't think it will either. But I thought Dobbs earned it. I would reward that as a coach. I think Dobbs has showed up to camp and played well in camp. Too. But again, I think that this is definitely between Mason and Haskins.
Right.
But I personally would like to see Dobbs get that. But yeah, I think Haskins has to start one of the next 2 games, and you have to see him against those top competition.
Yeah,
that they put out. So that's what I would like to see. Outside of that, defensively, again, Buddy Johnson, I'd like to see him get better reps. I'd like to see them switch up the D-line rotation. I'd like to see Davis maybe on the first team because they had Wormley and Mondo, I think, up there today. I would like to see, maybe that be maybe even Loudermilk up there and Davis and Bugs, see how those guys do, because that's a battle that we don't talk about a lot, but that D-line depth I think that's a big battle because I think all those spots are open. I think Wormley's probably a lock, but outside of that, there's 2 spots open on that D line. Who's going to make it? I don't think we know that. So that's a nice battle. And outside of that, I mean, there's not a lot other than that because I think you're going to see Highsmith continue to play well. Maybe see Melvin Ingram play a little bit because it was Marsh today. I would like to see, Ingram play a little bit, but I understand he's a vet, so you're trying to rest him. He's new to the system. But outside of that, I mean, I would like to see just because it is a camp battle, give Millette the start maybe next week, even though Brooks was better. Just if it's a battle, I feel like you should give each guy the fair shake, right? As long as they haven't completely tanked. And Millette hasn't been terrible at camp, so I feel like he could earn that start. And obviously, I think Brooks has been better, but
right, especially when you have an extra preseason game to deal with this year. So, again, Tomlin talked about liking being in this game. I'm sure that that's partly to honor the Steelers, but also because he has a lot to evaluate this year in the preseason. So many of these vets may not like it. I'm sure fans don't like it, having extra preseason games, but it actually really is a benefit and works a lot for this Steelers team that is evaluating a lot for this year. And then, of course, evaluating a lot for the future of this team and of this franchise. And 2020 is going to be just as important as this year is for the next decade of this franchise, even though Tomlin does not yet want to speak on that. Nick, I definitely appreciate the time. I am look to be getting the hook here in the press box. So I got to wrap things up here, but at least we got one of these in. I'm happy that we got a post-game show delivered to you guys here to open up our season of coverage on Steelers Now, since the Steelers opened up their season, kicking off the preseason in the Hall of Fame game where they win over the Dallas Cowboys. The Steelers win it 16-3. The score doesn't really matter, but some bright spots. They look good in spots. Some more to work on, of course. And that quarterback competition battle, that's really the talk of the town. That's really what everyone came to see and what the focus is of camp. It's quarterbacks, of course. It's the future maybe of this franchise after Ben. Mason Rudolph, Dwayne Haskins. Nobody really separated themselves. Maybe we're still back to square one. So we will see moving forward. Again, Nick Farabaugh, Mike Asti here of Steelers Now. Head to SteelersNow.com for all our coverage, all of my coverage of this game, as well as our coverage of the Hall of Fame induction ceremonies and the festivities all throughout the weekend and then beyond into training camp, which the Steelers will still have this weekend as well while I'm here in Canton. And also make sure to follow at PGH Steelers Now and at PGH Sports Live on Twitter and subscribe. Bottom of this video. Again, for Nick Farabaugh, for all of us here at Steelers Now and Pittsburgh Sports Live, that'll do it for this edition of Steelers Postgame on Pittsburgh Postgame here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. The Steelers get the win in the Hall of Fame game. Not necessarily looking like a Hall of Fame club, but it's early. It's week 1. It's the preseason, and a lot more to go from here.